Welcome back to season 2 of The Owner's Seat, the show where founders, franchise leaders, and operators stop sugarcoating the journey and talk honestly about numbers, decisions, and turning points that make or break a brand. This is where we unpack the real side of scaling: unit economics, cash flow pressure, bad hires, great acquisitions, great investments, bad investments, broken systems. And today we got one of the most important voices in the entire fitness, wellness, but I'm going to say it because this is real: the Halo ecosystem.
Thank
Go
you.
Halo. I'm joined by Pete Moore, founder and managing partner of Integrity Square, advisor on over $1.5 billion in transactions, creator of Halo Talks, builder of the Halo Academy, and I've had the pleasure of experiencing that first class, highly recommended. We'll chat about that. And one of the sharpest minds in deal discipline, franchising rigor, and operator reality. Pete has sat in every seat: advisor, investor, board member, operator, athlete, coach, and that soul cycle seat on the bike.
Thank you.
He's done that too. He's seen the deals that work, the ones that fall apart, and the ones that never should have happened in the first place. Today, we're digging into what buyers actually pay for in the fitness and wellness space, why franchisors without a strong item 19 and FDD should not be franchising. We might talk about that. How to run a sell side process that doesn't leave money on the table, the unit economic signals that tell you whether your brand is a dynasty or a ticking time bomb. And finally, the mindset straight out of sports. I can't wait to chat about this, that leaders need to survive the next 3 to 5 years. Pete, go Halo. I'm so pumped to have you here.
Awesome,
Welcome
man.
to the Owner Seat.
Well, it's that was a nice intro. I appreciate that, and it sounds like I should just keep my day job and not add to it. So I appreciate you kind of summarizing everything that I seem to be getting my hands involved in here. But I got a big team at Integrity Square that does a lot of the work, so I got to give them some street cred where it's deserved. But yeah, I was really psyched to have you and Dana and a couple other people in the Halo Academy, most recent one. I think you were one of the ones that really grasped the learnings and how to look at these businesses. Not that you didn't know how to do it before, but just to kind of really hone in on what's the business model, what's strategic, what happens by accident, which is probably not much.
Right.
And really honing in on like what is a good business and what do investors ultimately look at and what are they going to pay you for. So a guy I used to work for said, I'm going to create something of value, and when I want to sell it, someone's going to pay me for the value that I create. And I think that needs to be very methodical. And a lot of times it's saying no to deals that you want to do, but the lease just doesn't make sense, or the valuation isn't right, or there's some clause in a lease that you just can't get comfortable with. So all those little micro decisions turn into really strong companies, or turns into unfortunately, like train wrecks that we've seen.
For sure. Well, one thing, and yes, I had an amazing experience in the Halo Academy. One thing that I loved about it was the historical context that you give. There was a ton of education. And for those that haven't experienced it, case studies. This isn't no BS. This is the real deal. This is what's happened. Here's what happened to these brands. Here's what went well. Here's what didn't go so hot. Here's the ones that survived. Here's the ones that didn't, and why. What are the things you should be focusing on, and from different perspectives, as the investor, as the seller, as the buyer, right, as the operator. And so I really appreciated the way you brought it all together and the diversity of those that were in the academy. In my cohort, we're still chatting.
That's
It
great.
was awesome. I'm learning so much, not only from you, and by the way, shout out to your team and David. Such a first class experience, and to those that were there as well. So, and then you give us access to those that were in previous cohorts too. I'm like, this is amazing. I get to learn from even more people and connect and network.
Well, I'm glad you're utilizing it the way we envision. I would say that when I was in business school, somebody asked during a class that we were taking on the railroads, and someone's like, why are we going back this far in history, and the professor at the time said, look, what happened with the railroads is basically what's going to happen with the internet. And industries kind of merge and converge, and there's big players that double down when you've got a lot of infrastructure. And then as you look at the health club industry over time, and you look at it as new concepts come out, you can really say this kind of looks like this or this kind of looks like that. And if the
Right.
macroeconomic environment hasn't changed dramatically, or the psychology or behavior of people and humans hasn't changed, you can really say, look, I'm going to bet on this because it reminds me of X, and this was successful. And you can kind of go back in time and say, this company was where Orange Theory was, 15 years ago. This company was where Club Pilates was, a long time ago, or this company was where F45 was, and you steer clear of it. So a lot of the unit economics are, to me, almost like an open tell if you're playing a game of
Right.
poker, and you kind of know where things are going to end up unless somebody dramatically changes the business model and the DNA of a company. It's
Mm,
hard to like double down on something that's not working because hope is not a business strategy.
totally. Hope is not a business strategy. And speaking of historical context or looking back, man, I learned more about you when I was at Beyond Active. And I'm like, so I started reading your book, by the way. Great job.
Thanks.
So good. And I love your 2 minute drills. I watch all of them if you haven't noticed. I'm liking it. I'm not just to like them, I'm following them.
No, we
So really good
appreciate you.
job there.
Yeah, you're a super
Yeah, so
user for
good.
us. So
But
yeah, you'll get a
do you
you'll get
mind
a new
taking us
hat.
back to do you mind taking us back to that unforgettable game or performance, and what did it teach you? You played a little ball. I was excited to chat with you about that.
Yeah, look, I think I always lead off with once you're a soccer goalie, you're always a soccer goalie. And playing goal back in the day, really your whole mentality is like, I gotta just make sure we don't lose. Okay. And I got other guys that are responsible, if you will, for making sure that we win. Um,
Mhm.
and then when you kind of carry that as the goalie, and typical like persona of a goalie is really not somebody who has a big ego or is looking for statistics, because you really don't get many, except like your, goals against is basically like your only like metric that
Right.
anyone really like hones in on. Um, so as you kind of grow up as being a goalie, you realize that you're supporting the team to win. You are making sure we don't lose, and you're not looking for the trophy, and you're also not looking for any awards. But you're like the most important person behind the scenes. And I feel
Mm,
like as I got into business, and my dad used to be the CEO of a food service equipment company, and I kind of learned finance from the bottom up in Chase Manhattan Bank, and then at place called DLJ. And I
okay.
realized that there's entrepreneurs out there that are doing big things. And, can I be kind of like the goalie for them, if you will, is kind of the role that I was playing, which is basically, looking at the shots that are coming in, figure out which ones we're gonna, take and which ones we're not. How do we build a big defense here to make sure that we
Mm,
got a rock solid business? Hire the right people. Like I used to have this guy Wayne Fader and Josh Frankel, were on my defense. Those guys could have played forward, but like I was like, dude, I need you back here. Like we got to build a wall. And I kind of carried that forward. So when a deal closes, I'm super happy for the client. We do a little bit of hip hip hooray internally. But we're not out there like overly marketing the deals we get done, or
you hitting the
talking about
gong?
ourselves. Yeah, we do these like fake hockey sticks with like
That's cool.
plastic. We do like a little jumping around the
I
conference room.
love that.
When the wire hits, we're like, yeah, the wire hit, and then everyone jumps up. But having an advisor that's in your corner, and not looking to necessarily like, we got to close this deal because I want to get a fee, which a lot of
Mm,
financial advisory and financial service markets has always been about, fee generation.
oh, yeah.
And there was a guy I used to work for, Hal Rich, back at DLJ, and then at a firm called Sage, and he always said, look, you got to always be like long-term greedy, and you got to be able to always tell your client, like, don't do this deal, or I don't recommend you do this deal. And it gives you such credibility and
Totally.
points for when it is the right decision to make a deal. So the one thing in our business, and you probably feel the same way, especially in the health and fitness and the bricks and mortar, I've known most of the operators that we work with as clients for anywhere between like 5 to 25 years since I've been doing this.
Mm,
So I kind of view them as a friend. They view me as a trusted advisor. They probably know me by my nickname, PD Mo. Sometimes they take me seriously, sometimes they don't. But business in this business is personal, and I don't think there's any way to kind of bifurcate the two anymore. At least for me, as you build relationships, and your role as a fractional CFO or CFO or advisor, you want that person to be successful in and of itself, as well as you want their business to be successful. And you want to just kind of add to like an aha moment for them or a new way to look at their business. There are times when I'll meet with someone, I'll just kind of look at a random KPI, let's say like square feet per member is something
Right.
I focus in on. And then, if someone will call me 5 years later and be like, hey man, that conversation we had, like that conversation, like changed my whole view of my entire business. And I didn't even know it, but I'm like, hey, that's awesome. Like, not that you get paid for it, but you're like making change and you're making people
Impact.
successful. And the best part of our business is if somebody builds a club and they're successful and they go on to build 20, multiply that by 5,000 members, 100,000 people work out because you helped that decision and kind
So
of
good.
push that down the pike. So that's kind of my mentality as a goalie, as a athlete is, what do I got to do? Leave it on the field and do whatever it takes to not lose. Not necessarily win. I just want to make sure we don't lose.
I love that you close that loop though around we know the challenges that we have throughout the country, even the world when it comes to health and wellness in its different ways. But I love how you connect that passion, that impact that you're making with the work that you do on the finance investment side. I think that's far we need that far more. And what I love about you is you're very vocal about it. You promote it. I mean, that is the halo part of the halo brand and what you're trying to accomplish here.
Well, as I was thinking about, it was about 10 years ago or so when I used to be telling people that I'm a health and wellness banker because wellness was kind of like the word everyone used. And I'm like, this word
Right.
doesn't resonate with me. Probably doesn't resonate with you. So I Googled it. And it turns out that there was a guy at the Mayo Clinic back in the 1950s. His name was Dr. Halbert Dunn. And he was looking at the biostats and it came up and basically said, look, there's all these chronic diseases. We got to come up with a movement that's the opposite of illness. So the wellness industry is basically an antonym of the word illness, right? So illness to wellness. So it's really like the not sick industry. And then as people come to me, these entrepreneurs with these awesome wearables and tech and SaaS and training apps and new technology and equipment and awesome, new games that people are playing or pro sports. I'm like, this is so much more than wellness, right? Like we really have to take this to another level. And I came up with this acronym. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning one day in New York City. I was like, holy shit, like this acronym HALO, almost like that game of Boggle that you play, like I used to play with my grandma.
Yeah.
Like health active lifestyle kind of really like encompasses every person that lives our lifestyle. They want to be outdoors. They're not, sitting on their couch playing video games.
Mhm.
Active lifestyle where, they care what they wear, they care how they look. They take preventative control of their health. And I said, look, I'm kind of like in this unique position where I've done all the financial, education and done deals in private equity. And I got lucky enough to work at a firm that acquired Gold's Gym. If they didn't acquire
Wow.
Gold's Gym, I wouldn't be doing this. So, I
Wow.
got really excited about being in a private equity fund for a period of time, and they bought Gold's Gym, and I was like, hey, this industry kind of fits me well because I'm an athlete. At the end of the day, I think I kind of wear my creds on my sleeve. I want to go out there. I want to help people. I don't play individual sports. I play team sports, which you could say banking is a team sport. And I kind of gotten to the point now where I realize that if somebody needs capital and they've got a good business and it's in our sector, I have to kind of put it on myself and our team personally to figure out how do we get this entrepreneur capital because they are going to change their community or they're going to change their state or they're going to change
Totally.
their region or they're going to change the
Wow.
world. So like EOS is a great example of a deal that we did when it was 17 Gold's Gyms and it was owned by Brad and Wanda Nesty
Uh-huh.
and we were selling the company and we were selling it. And 3 days before the deal closed, the entrepreneur said to me, the owner's like, look, I don't think I want to do this deal for XYZ reason. And they had a lot of debt on the business that they were going to put on as part of the transaction. And, I sat down with them. I encouraged them to do the deal. We worked out the terms with the buyer. Now, those 17 clubs are now EOS, which are 158 locations, got valued at $1.5 billion and they're rocking and rolling.
Rocket.
And they'll probably be a public company one day and have like 300,
Agreed.
400, locations and the requisite amount of probably $400 million of EBITDA. And that started from an M&A transaction that almost didn't happen. It's a funny
Yeah.
story. I was literally wearing I'm a big like Halloween guy. So I like used to dress up all the time. And I happened to have this, I had this medieval knight costume, and
Good.
it was not Halloween. It was like in December. My buddy had a birthday party. I'm like, I think I'm going to wear my medieval knight costume for some reason. And I'm at this dinner and I'm getting text messages from my client, the Gold's Gym guy that we're selling to EOS. And he calls me up and I step out. And I just thought to myself, like, if anyone was taping this, me giving this guy advice in a medieval knight costume on the corner of Gansevoort and like West 10th, and I'm like wearing like that like armor and everything. It was a nice
Yeah.
costume. But that deal got resolved like while I was in a medieval knight costume, as an example. So you got to be on all the time as a banker, but like you never know what's going to happen. So my point going forward here is that if I can get people to wave the Halo flag and not just
Sure.
like, hey, I'm in the wellness industry, or hey, I'm like a health club, or I'm just like in the sports performance, or I'm in the youth training. But if I can like define a much bigger category that has tailwinds of look, what do you buy? You're a consumer of supplements, vitamins, brands that resonate with your family, things that are eco-friendly, things that are organic. You take trips. I mean, I select hotels based on how close they are to a Soul Cycle. Okay.
Mhm.
Like if that doesn't make me like a Halo evangelist, like I don't know what does, right? So all these choices that you and I and people, in the Halo sector are making is the industry. And then the question is, okay, if you're an investor and you say you like the Halo sector, let me show you all the different ways you could effectively invest, grow, and play the sector. So
Right.
that's kind of like our big audacious goal. And it doesn't need to happen all through Integrity Square. I just kind of want to push it out there, and then let's just keep moving it forward. And that's kind of, where that's what I want to be known for. I want to be Captain Halo, so I can wear a
Yeah.
cape instead of medieval knight costume.
Well, you're known for a lot of great things. You have a strong reputation. I'm telling you, the Halo buzz is out there. People
Thank
are
you.
chatting about it. So keep up the great work, sir. And
Thank
and I
you.
do want to come back to EOS that you now that you brought it up because I'm very intrigued. But and as I was mentioning your book, there were so many nuggets on it, and I would love to ask you as I put the spotlight back on you around that sports habit. As you were playing ball, what is that sports habit that has followed along in your operating cadence, and then what is your winning not as an athlete anymore, but as an investor on the banking side, on the investment side? What is winning to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. To go to the part about playing sports, as I look at like college football right now, I'll start at a different place than we're going to end here. But you look at college football and guys that used to play 4 years and play at a school, and they'd interview these guys after a game, and they have like senior night. These guys are like crying, and you realize like the power of the team that's been created. I think this whole NIL thing's kind of gotten out of control, but like it is what it is. We live in a capitalist society, so it's gonna go that
It's
way.
bound to happen.
Yeah, but if you think about some of the best times that I've had were playing on the soccer team, playing on the roller hockey team, the basketball team, and I think some of the most enjoyable or like memorable times is like taking a charge, in the paint with like a couple seconds left, and not necessarily like the guy shooting a three, but it's like everyone's like, hey, the guy that took the charge used to take more charges than like probably like half of Long Island,
I did not
so
expect that answer, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah.
That's
So
good.
so, when I think about, like, team sports and I just think about the responsibility that you have to other people, and that you have to rely on other people to win in any team sport, that just always kinda, like, resonated with me as, like, the way you have to run your business. It's the way you have to think about your advisors. Somebody once said to
Yeah.
me, um somebody said to me like, "Oh yeah, your invoices with accounts payable, or like like with the vendor payments." I'm like, "Look, you're not my customer, okay? You're like my client, and I'm your advisor or I'm your banker. Like I'm not your vendor, okay? So like, I think words matter, and you got to look at me differently. And if I'm running your deal, like I'm basically like the point guard for like the most important game you're ever going to play." Right. Like if you have 20 health clubs, or 10 health clubs, or 100, boutique fitness studios, you want to take that company to market to try and get the best price, to get the best terms, to narrate the company the way you want it to, you really kind of have only one chance to do that, over
Right.
like a 1 year period. Because if the deal doesn't happen, then everyone in the financial community that looked at it says, "Oh, it's a dead deal. There must be
Right.
something wrong with it."
Uh-huh.
Buyer XYZ didn't get a hold of it. So I spent a lot of time up front kind of planning on what the story is, and put the materials together to kind of to play out the game, if you will. So those are some of the things I would say from a sports analogy is like, we got to play out what someone's going to look at, and we got to get ahead of things that could cause us problems and take timeouts along the way. Is one of the chapters in the book.
I uh I just learned so much about you. One, I played basketball, and for those that don't understand what that means, when you're taking a charge, I mean, you're literally standing still, straight up. You better puff out your chest or something to protect
Right.
yourself. You're crossing your hands over yourself where you need it to be, and you're letting someone pretty much just run you over. That's
Exactly.
the whole thing, right? The defensive move. And so my question for you is it more of the Vladi Divac taking the charge or the Derek Fisher taking the charge?
I think it's the Vladi,
The
but
Vladi.
also like I don't. I mean, I wish I was playing back. I wish I was
Oh,
playing
man.
now, knowing the information we have. Right. I used to eat
Right.
like a meatball hero and like a chocolate milk before a game. From the lunchroom. Right now, we probably have a little better nutrition.
Fuel. That's fuel, man.
Yeah, who
That's
knows?
fuel.
I don't know if it's the right fuel. Sounds like
Yeah.
leaded gas and not unleaded. But like they didn't teach you how to fall back in the day. I think, that's kind of like a new thing on like, knowing how to take a charge. But there's just so many analogies on, when you see a dynasty or you see an awesome like, hockey game and these guys just know where they are, where the other guys are and going to the puck. And I think a lot of businesses that are successful scaling, basically take their core team that they
Mhm.
developed in a certain territory and basically like just kind of launch them further out in a cluster.
Yeah.
One of the best companies that I had worked with was a group called Urban Active, which was turned out to be 36 clubs out of Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio. And what they would do is they had gold. There used to be a World Gym, then they were Gold's Gym, then they rebranded to Urban Active. But they started in Lexington, Kentucky. Then they went to Louisville. Then they went to Cincinnati, and they would take this couple. It was Kelly and somebody, the guy's name Robinson, and Bill. I think it's Bill Kelly and Bill Robinson. They would be like the advanced team, almost like the scouting team
Right.
of a basketball or football team. They would scout that area. Then they would move there. Then they would
Wow.
bring like the assistant managers that were became general managers. General managers from this area would kind of move to the next city, and they basically just like went like a game of Risk
Yeah.
up the state of Ohio, then to Pittsburgh, then to Atlanta. And they looked at locations in other markets, but they knew like TKO, like Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, like this is our area where we can move our best people around.
Yeah.
And if you think about a team, and in high school, like my nephew plays, he plays offense and defense, but as you could kind of like take a team and educate them on how you want to run the play, and then you could actually replicate the play because you actually push those people into the next bigger opportunity.
Right.
Um, that's a successful growth plan. I see some companies, I'm not going to name it, that I was at a management presentation. They're based in the Southeast, and one of the guys who's head of real estate said to the investor group that was asking questions, where are you going to grow? And he's like, our software is so good, we don't actually even have to go visit the city that we're going into. And I'm like, dude, do not say that, bro. It's like
Thank
300
you,
bucks.
ArcGIS. You tell us all. We believe it.
It's
It's
like three.
Bible.
It's like $300 to get a round trip ticket at the time on Southwest. Like, dude, just go visit the city. And they made some really big. We actually ended up not getting the deal done. They partnered with another group, but it imploded. And one of the reasons why is because they just didn't put in the work.
Right.
Just relied on technology. So they went to a city that has raised highways that show like, oh, 600,000 cars, but there's no exit. So it doesn't matter that there's 600,000 cars passing by this location that happens to be next to a methadone clinic, in an area of town that you don't want to be in. Um,
Yeah.
so, I always say my nephew and I, and every time I work out with anybody, I always do like hands in, I do 1, 2, 3 hard work. And I think there's no, you could use ChatGPT to help you do things, but like you really got to do the work. And if you
Yep.
do the work, you get rewarded for it. But those are like the attention to detail. Make sure you got the right people in the right place. Don't grow until you're ready to grow.
Yeah.
Those are the things that resonate with me over time of what I've seen. I look at every deal as like I've seen a movie, and I have a good photographic memory of that
Mm,
movie. And that's why you can look back in history and say, "Hey, Planet Fitness, like that business was built based on frustration and desperation." And then they figured out, hey, as I grow Planet Fitness, I'm not going to layer in personal training. I'm not layering
right.
in group
All the
exercise.
bells and whistles.
I'm not layering in because like I remembered how that felt. I remembered it didn't work. So Planet did a great job of saying no to what would be perceived profit centers because they knew that it wasn't a profit center when they started. And that's how they got into
Yeah.
that, kind of mess. And then they worked their way out of it. So kudos to people that, figure out what they're doing and don't just keep doing the same thing. Um,
Yeah.
so
I love that. I just saw Ed Milet on stage. It's funny. We used to back when I was back home in Southern California, Laguna. He'd work out. He is a completely different human when working out to himself, nice and quiet on stage. Just a freak of nature. Great story, by the way, very impactful. But he said, "Are you interested or are you committed?"
mm,
And you're interested, like, yeah, sure, we could dream, we could come up with these great ideas. I'm interested in doing XYZ or growing my portfolio or making X dollars. But are you committed to doing it? Or are you going to listen to the BS stories that you tell yourself that's preventing you from going actually achieving that? I'm like, holy smokes, man. I'm leaving. I got to go to work. I got to go do
yeah,
something. Like
yeah,
I'm ready to rock.
yeah.
Oh man, it was so good. But it reminded me what you just said. Like, are you going to move there? Are you going to plant your
Yeah,
flag? Are you going to learn about all the ins and outs of the
yeah,
traffic? Or are you just going to sit behind ArcGIS and say, well, I guess it's gold?
yeah. I mean, there are guys that used to sit with like those little, people thumb counters,
Totally.
in DC.
Watching traffic go
It's
by.
got
Yeah,
Paul London and Mark Tasher back in the day. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, oh, we're just checking traffic. I'm like, how long you guys been sitting there? Like, about a week. I'm like, and they made no mistakes. No mistakes on new
exactly.
locations. It was amazing. Um,
Variance analysis was like beautiful.
Yeah, the
Perfect.
Galliani brothers in DC, I don't think they've ever like made a real mistake on a club. Um,
Amazing.
the one thing that just reminded me there was because we get a lot of calls from people that are starting up new companies, and yeah, I can't really help everybody because we're investment banking. You got to have like a wheelhouse of what you're good at
Sure.
and who the buyers are. But I usually take a lot of calls, probably like you do, and maybe I'll have somebody on the Halo Talks is kind of to not say no. I'll say, hey, look, I'll do like an infomercial with you on Halo Talks and get the story out there. And there was this guy who's all passionate. He's telling me about how awesome this like organic grocery store is going to be in Detroit. This is like 15 years ago, and he keeps talking to me. We're talking about the unit economics, talking about the area. And I say,
Mhm.
where do you live in Detroit? He's like, bro, I don't live in Detroit, man. I live in fucking like, Williamsburg. I'm like, man, you gotta live in it to win it because there's no
Right.
way this thing's gonna like work on a remote control. Like it just
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. Um, so yeah, you really got to commit yourself if you want to build a real business. And I don't think people fully appreciate. I don't think my mom and dad do like the sacrifices that you have to make to be an entrepreneur, or the sacrifices that you think you should make as an entrepreneur. I've had, people I've worked with. Used to like live in the office, and like sleep on one of those cushions on for like a
Yeah.
lounge chair. Of doing customer support back with my software company. Um, and then
My
you get
coach.
yeah, and then you get some people that will not get married or they won't have a boyfriend, won't have a girlfriend because they just can't afford to refocus on somebody else or
Mhm.
have any additional expenses except running their business. And there's a lot of people out there, and I interview a lot of them. This guy CJ Bouchard who runs Excel
Saw
Fitness
that.
Planet. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
talking to that guy. He's like, he's driving 2 hours a day each way from like, you know, what was it like, it was Wilmington to like Raleigh, like 2 hours a day each way, then picking up, dropping his kid off at school and picking it up. And, those are things
Committed.
that you got to do as an entrepreneur. But, when you walk a studio or you walk a health club with someone who built it, you know that this person's like blood, sweat, and tears are in it.
Mhm.
They go around, like you'll be in the parking lot, they'll be picking up, if there's like a tissue on the ground or a cup, like
Right.
they have such pride in the location. And I think you can AI the way through life if you want, but if you care, caring's going to trump artificial intelligence as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Grit.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
gritty, being scrappy, and it's this AI is not gonna replace that.
Yeah.
Speaking of EOS, so I'm so glad you brought them up. They are killing it. Actually, it's so funny. I thought about you the other day because I was in an EOS, but the way it was set up was in Corona, California, pretty much like top of the freeway. It reminded me of that case study around LA Fitness and how they placed them perfectly.
Right.
Now, EOS doesn't operate like LA. They do, in my opinion, operate far better. And I'm just so interested to see where they're going. But it was on there, the lighting, that beauty, that hue that they have, the color that they use, the blue or whatever it is, and then you walk in and it's just like, holy smokes, this place is massive. A lot of people there actually using it, but they're in, I mean, they had turf, they had, racks, they had a recovery. Like they're actually expanding into recovery as well.
Mhm.
What is, what's going on over there? Like, how are they doing it? They're doing so well. They're on a run. They obviously have a lot of money backing too. What do you see?
Well, I just think they've got a team that knows how to execute and can scale. But that didn't happen by accident. They when the company was originally converted from a Golds to an EOS, had kind of figured out the HVLP 2.0 play, and they were kind of the leaders in. Okay, this was Planet's doing with their box and with their just equipment only, and we figured they figured out the pricing. They spent a
Mhm.
lot of money on marketing. And then they went into areas where they were the A location. So they didn't play a B location game. They played an A location game. And,
Excellent.
and then when you start in areas that have really strong, organic, or greenfield growth, and you put them next to where these big high schools were in Arizona, and there's a lot of rooftops, and you kind of grow with a city that's growing like Phoenix and with Vegas, you can kind of pick up like 10 to 15,000 members just based
Mhm.
on providing a product that has all the things that people would want. And then I think the thing that they're really good at is repurposing space as they see
Yeah.
opportunities. So,
Yeah.
EOS was, Gold's Gym and back then and the EOS originally was not as heavy on like strength and on like posing rooms and, really, really focusing on like what the member and the younger demographic wanted. I think that morphed over time and they've really been able to figure it out. And then they poached a lot of people from other, ex Gold's Gym people that really knew what they
Yeah.
were doing.
Right.
And they built out a marketing team and they have member rewards. And I think what, Rich Strenberg, who's the CEO, kudos to him, and Dave Reisman, who used to be like the head
Killing
of
it.
PR
Oh,
for
Dave. Yeah. It's a good
Gold's
guy.
Gym, Venice. Um, those guys have kind of seen how the industry evolves and they typically they know what's around the corner instead of waiting for it. They actually go after it. And
Mm.
the group that was their original investor with BRS, they put in debt financing. They went to real estate groups and got them to build out locations, for them on freestanding spots, which have a great, curb appeal, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, and they basically said, look, this is the box I want to have. I'm not going to really go and just make acquisitions to make acquisitions. I'm going to, build a box that I want for 15, 20 years. So I think it's been very disciplined growth. It's been
Yeah.
very aggressive. But
Very.
if you look back 10 years when the original deal happened, from 17 up to, I think it was 125, that's really like 10 clubs a year. Right. So it doesn't sound like, crazy growth.
Mhm.
Um, and as you build a team and people understand how the model works and you utilize technology, you can scale. And then you have real estate investors and real estate developers coming to you and say, what's it going to take to get you in here? Because I
Yeah.
know you bring a significant amount of traffic, which I think the industry, this is probably like the fever pitch of real estate developers courting health clubs and boutique operators where, to give you a history lesson on a couple things, there used to
Yeah.
be prohibitions in leases with Home Depot, Target, Sears, and Kmart, Walmart, where the developer was not allowed to lease any space to a health club because they
Mhm.
thought they would take up too many parking spots. Now it's like the way I can make sure somebody actually comes into my
The
retail
anchor.
store, right? As an
Yeah.
anchor. So like the playing field has changed dramatically. Um, and look, there's some great businesses out there that have made the capital investment. Take a look at what Lifetime's doing. Take a look what Bay Club's doing.
Right.
Fit Athletic is a group. This group I work with out of San Diego. They're going into social. They're doing concerts. They're doing
Love it.
outdoor saunas, and it's kind of like creating. So like the part that kind of gets me like the chills in like a really good way is that they're kind of creating a world that I want to live in. And that's like the
Exactly.
Halo world. And
That's the
I got a
best.
I got a good buddy of mine. I'm not going to mention his name 'cause I'm pissed at him right now. But he like opened up like a cake store, and like fucking delivering sugar to people and like, so South Florida. I'm like, dude, I can't. I don't know if I can even be friends with you anymore. You know, it's like we got childhood diabetes, and you're like sending big cakes out the door to for Thanksgiving, where I'm trying to like get people to go into the club and lose 20 pounds. So I feel like there's this huge wave, at our sales, but at the same time, like we got to make sure, like I got to make sure from an investment standpoint that there's not another Bally Total Fitness,
Mm.
black eye. I got to make sure that, no offense, but like F45 was like never a good business, right? You and I discussed this, doing $30,000 a month in revenue is not a business that you should get paid to give to someone. Like I could do that shit on my own for 30,000. I can lose money on my own, right? Without paying you for a letter in two digits, so I,
Mark Wahlberg.
yeah, well, I don't know. He's back. He's actually working now with EOS doing something called Municipal Fitness.
I bet.
So
Yeah.
good for him.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you can be resurrected, I guess, right? Especially if you're a movie star. No, the point is that like I think entrepreneurs also need to take accountability for what types of new concepts that come out. Like somebody came to me and said, "We're going to do like aerial yoga and cycling." I'm like, "Why? Like, did you find something out there like your body resonated with that?" Or they're like, "No, we think both of them are trending." I'm like, "Well, that's like a recipe for not a good business model." And when those things get funded, as an example, there's somebody in the investment community who's like, "Oh, bro, I fucking lost all this money in the fitness industry."
Yeah.
Right. So when I started in this, this was like 20 years ago. I used to have a page in the materials that I would send out or that I would present to investors. Why is this company not like Bally Total Fitness? Literally, it was a page with their
Hedge.
logo on it. It
Yeah.
says like, we
The
don't,
true comp.
yeah, we don't finance our memberships and sell them away. The place doesn't smell like a high school, locker room. There's zero machines out of order. They have like 30 machines out of order. I used to tour. I'm getting a little excited now. I used to tour some of the Bailey Fitness with a client of mine that we were going to buy some and try and, either take the membership and move it over, or we were going to try and invest in it. And we would walk in there and we weren't like wearing like suits or anything. We were just like four people touring a club together and looking around, and like members would literally line up and be like, "Hey, are you with corporate? Like this elliptical's been out for 7 years. Hey, this the sauna in there, it hasn't worked for 12 years." And I'm just like, "Holy shit!" Like you can't like line up
Not
more
looking
like
good.
deferred capex like verbally
Right.
from the members that are in here. So I feel like we have a responsibility to make sure that companies don't take on too much debt, that
Right.
there's like disciplined growth, that these clubs are successful. When one club goes across the street from another club, I say to myself, like, this isn't like McDonald's and Burger King, or like, Subway going in, and people say they eat 3 times a day, bro. They eat like 5 or 6 times a day on average, right? So you can have those food groups there,
Unless
but
you're on GLPs. Unless you're on GLPs.
yeah, well, that's a huge benefit to us as well. So the point is, like, I feel like the business models that should be funded, need to have a level of scrutiny to make sure that they're capable of being funded. I think
Mm.
we need to make sure that there aren't too many black eyes or bankruptcies in the industry. COVID kind of cleared out 20-30% of the clubs that weren't doing well anyway and give them like a
Probably more,
graceful
yeah.
exit, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about Planet Fitness. I'm excited about Crunch. They're running operations with, real executives that know what they're doing. It's very disciplined, and, they're giving people experiences that they want at a reasonable price. And then
Right.
on the high end, having Lifetime Fitness go kind of all in on pickleball, and Bay Clubs going in on all in on like campuses and families. I feel like every category is well represented by a brand and people that I believe in, which is
Yeah.
great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I like like you say, in those brands on the HVLP side, Planet. I mean, they continue to be on fire. Crunch is the way that I don't know if it's a rebound, but more so like we're back on the map.
Yeah.
And I truly think EOS, they're eating people's lunch. I'll tell you, when I was at Lifetime, I saw one being built across the street. I'm like, and now if we were to go rewind, I'm like, holy smokes, we need to circle them in. We're not gonna let them succeed. I mean, they're doing a great job. So yeah,
Yeah.
great job to the leadership team. Yeah, Dave, I had an opportunity to spend time and work with him at Golds. And then I was excited about the Banos brothers whole deal out in Southern California. I never thought it would happen. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, I mean,
I
Rich
love that
Stremberg.
Golds
Yeah.
right away. They were like, all right, now we're franchising again in Southern
I
California.
know. It's funny how that sequencing
Great.
came out. It was like the deal got announced and the next day Gold's is like trying to backfill those locations, but that's just to understand that ownership of businesses is very important. And some
Mhm.
people say, oh, this brand, this, did this or did that. Gold's Gym used to have a private equity fund when I was involved that would not let someone else buy their franchisees. So in every franchise agreement that is signed by the franchisee, the FDD, there's a clause in there that has a right of first refusal, which basically
Right.
says like, back in the 80s and back in like the 90s, 24 hours started buying up a lot of Gold's gyms.
Mm.
And the Gold's Gym operators would then present that deal to Gold's Gym corporate, and they didn't have a financing group or capital at the ownership level to basically buy those clubs and keep them as Golds. So for a period of time when it was owned by Brockway Moran and Partners, they didn't let anybody, exercise they didn't let anyone leave that they wanted to buy. One and two, they had a relationship with the franchisees that they didn't want to leave the brand, and didn't really transact with anyone. And then now you've got, unfortunately, the owner of RSG, Brown Schaller, passed away, right? So his entity is not affecting and buying up clubs that are now leaving the Gold's Gym brand. I mean, if you look at EOS, Vasa, Fitness Connection, Experience Fitness, Vent Fitness, Catalyst Fitness, One Life, couple more, Best Fitness up in Massachusetts. All these guys were all Gold's Gyms. Okay.
Yeah.
So Gold's Gym would be the largest chain in the country if it wasn't for the ownership of the Gold's Gym brand over a period of time. And if it was for private equity funds to basically bet on the Gold's Gym brand and that franchise or franchisee relationship, if it was strong, it would be Planet Fitness 1 and Gold's Gym number 2, So, and you think now like strength training, like everyone talks about strength training. What is Gold's Gym? It's the place where you're supposed to like put
Yeah,
on
the
muscle.
logo would come back.
It's
It
like
would actually go back to the legacy
it's
logo.
like, what do you run away from Gold's Gym like strength training for? Like people should be adding the Gold's Gym name now, but now it's
Right.
just it's kind of like too little, too late.
Time
Unfortunately.
has passed.
Yeah.
Well, we talked HVLP, boutique fitness, some of the high end, right? Like Lifetime, and we throw Equinox in there. Actually, I'm really excited about potentially F45's turnaround, Tom, and what they're doing over there. It seems
Well, with the
I don't know,
yard,
they got a lot of money pumping in marketing, so it seems
are
sexy.
you
It
talking
seems
about the
like there's
yard,
bounce-
or are you talking about F45?
Okay.
There's something in the called the
The
yard.
yard is good. The yard is good too, but no F45 and what they're doing in the Pilates space. But
Oh yeah.
well,
I mean, look, Pilates is an awesome workout. I wish I did it more, but I've done solid core several times, and
yeah.
it's a great workout. And yeah, I think like the time that you put into the results that you get on Pilates is probably like the number one, modality. And you're obviously, from people that were concerned about COVID, you're kind of spaced away. You don't have to move around a lot, so it was a great uplift for people and a safe place for them to work out. And I don't
Sure.
really see that ending anytime soon. People say,
No.
when do you think the curve ends on Pilates? I'm not sure it ends anytime soon.
I agree. Yeah, good brands out there. Yeah, Strong and Solid Core, Brian and Nate. I'm looking forward to having Nate on the show. Brian was too busy for me, so he's not coming
No,
on.
it's
But Nate's coming on, so it's like, great. Let's
make
talk
it a
finance.
20. Oh yeah, Nate
We'll
Scott.
take it.
Yeah, good guys.
Yeah, he's gonna get on.
But they're like
But
very disciplined with what they do, and they know their model. And
right.
yeah, I had Brian on a panel with me at I think you saw
That's
it at
right. Yes.
Beyond Active and at Fit Tech Summit. And he's like, look, I'm only going to grow as quickly as I know that I can, deliver the experience and the personnel on my team that could do it. So, good for him. And that's That's kind of what you want to hear. There's
Exactly.
this one guy, to give a little click over to Terry Blaychek, but he used to say, like, at Orange Theory, he used to say, I can't microwave a manager. I have to crock pot them. And, that's just basically how long it's going to take me to grow until I have the right people. Cause I'm not just going to build studios and think that they're going to, operate like a laundromat, like I'm delivering a
Yeah,
brand and experience and results, and that's how it works. So,
absolutely.
I think, there's a lot of private equity that's coming to the space, which is awesome because people don't have to sign personal guarantees on anything, which
Right.
allows you to grow quicker. I think the groups like Mountainside's owned by Garnet Station. I think those guys are
Right.
great and that they're going to do big things, and take a lot of experience from other multi-unit operations that they built out in the restaurant and car wash and service industries. So I think private equity net is a really good thing for the industry, and it's going to allow more and more bricks and mortar locations to be built. I just hope that, we're not talking in 5 years from now. And the one thing that we say is like there's such irrational development
Mm.
that happens that these guys are all on top of each other because they're all maybe a little overly cocky about their business model and that the demographics just aren't there to fill each one of these boxes, you know?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, and let's speculate a little bit, right? Let's look out into the future and think the Halo economy in totality, right? Because there's the wellness space in fit tech. There's now this like wellness, longevity, peptide, GLP, bat housing, right? You got other ship out there doing some cool work and some other different brand, Remedy Place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people are realizing this is very hard to do. This isn't like you
Yeah.
build it and they come just because the pandemic happened and people want to spend money on their wellness and health. You got to operate it. You got to do it the right way. And I'm not saying they're not. They're doing a great job. But where do you see money flowing into if you were to just guess? Right, we're guessing here. We're speculating outside of HVLP and some of the boutique, or maybe that's what it is. Maybe it just continues there, or is it elsewhere in this economy?
Yeah. Look, I mean, other shipping, I had to Jason, maybe the guy who started it out of Toronto.
Robbie, Robbie,
Robbie, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Robbie. Thanks. Yeah, I had him on the show like back during COVID, and he was telling me, basically like did this out of like his house, and then turned
yeah.
it into a location, and then came to New York and started. Look, he hit on, he learned right. It wasn't like he came up with a business plan. Like he came up with an experience that he wanted to have during COVID, and they saw the demand for it, and then he took that demand and turned it into a business model, and then kind of built out and architected, infrared sauna, bigger than
Right.
anybody would say, like that's reasonable, right? Or like you could do like group, you know, recovery, and you could do like yoga and anything else like in these types of areas. So, you know, experience is the best way to personal experience or personal frustration has been solved is the best way to start a business, right? You solve it for yourself and then solve it for other people. And then you kind of know that it works or it doesn't work. So I think like the old like bathhouses and, people going to, med spas and maybe having that med spa, an augmented space. I think the
Right.
question is going to be, if you take a look at, what Lifetime's doing, or you take a look at a Bay Clubs, or say somebody's got a big sports complex, could they
Mhm.
bring that in and provide people with that technology? Or is it like really experiential? Um, if you and I say like, hey, there's a Top Golf at Lifetime, do we want to go there, or do you and I kind of want to go to Top Golf
Right.
because like it's an experience, we kind of like it. It's got a little different vibe than going to the health club. So I think there's going to be certain things that the clubs can do on their own and bring that in, like a golf simulator. And then I think there's going to be places where, hey, I want to do something at another location that just like specializes in that type of experience. So I think people are going to
Yeah.
pay more for experiences. I think there was some stat that struck me about like there were like 50% of like the vacation homes in some Colorado town were for sale because no one wants to maintain a second home, and their kids don't necessarily want to devote like a week or 2 or 3 weeks to go, with their parents to a ski resort and bring their whole family. So people are going to destination resorts, or they're going to an Airbnb for a couple days, or I think the time that people are spending on vacations with their family unfortunately is probably shortened.
Mm.
um, and then I think the experiences that people are spending money on is really where the Halo sector is going to kind of benefit from. And I think
Yeah.
if you include Halo in the health, active lifestyle, and the outdoors, I think a lot of hotels and resorts are really like cued in now. They're like, hey, I got to have yoga classes going on. I need bikes. I need hiking trails. I want, organic food. I want personal trainers or group exercise. Like all that's awesome because we don't want people to go on vacation and kind of, like you go to like, Panama City or, go to Vegas. We want them to go to something that's like in our ecosystem. And that's now
Sure.
become more and more available. And people are paying
Yeah.
a lot of money for those
They're paying
experiences.
top
Just make
dollar
it,
for it. Yeah,
yeah, it makes them
absolutely.
feel good though. So, so the one thing that bothers me, by the way, I'll just say one thing, totally off the reservation here. Like I saw that like George Clooney is doing a alcohol free beer drink or
Mm,
something.
yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, why can't you just come up with like a creatine or protein shake? Like, like you George Clooney, like why you got to stay in like the alcohol
Well,
section?
first it was the coffee, right? He did that brand, and now it's the alcohol.
I don't know. I was just saying, like, there's always people that could be doing good and, changing people's habits and lifestyles, and then I see, look, I used to wear Under Armour all the time, and then unfortunately Kevin Plank starts like a whiskey brand or scotch or something like, bro, you are like the face of like fitness. Like, why are you going into to the alcohol section? Like, just stay
Mm.
true to who you are. I wonder if you looked at the stock, the day that he decided, like, I'm going to spend my time,
Oh, I'm
with
sure.
spirits, just kind of little things like that they kind of irk me because I feel like we really have the ability to get someone in our category and then like have them champion it and market it. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
guys that do it, and guys that are doing all these like crazy biohacking, biohacking is not even intimidating to anybody anymore. 10
Right.
years ago, it was like, holy shit, like you're going to do this or you're going to fast for X amount of days or, you
Heck
know,
yeah.
you're going to, the women that we work with at Higher Dose, they used to do all these like experiments. Now it's just like, yeah, that's what people do, so the industry is definitely
Well,
moving
I'm
in our
doing like 9
direction.
injections a day. I'm doing everything.
Yeah,
Just
no,
my
it's
blood and
awesome.
my
Yeah. The
yeah,
one thing
that's
about
too
investing in like some of these early stage concepts is that, what people need to realize that one, it takes a lot to sell a company. So
well,
if whoever's listening to this and like has some money and they're saying like, I'm going to put 250 into this company and 250 into that and 100 into this, all these new ideas, you have to understand that these are all experiments. And most
hmm,
experiments don't work. Okay. Because you're doing an experiment to say, hey, let me go build a 40,000 square foot health club that has all these different amenities. And you're like, well, hey, Lifetime's right there. EOS is right there. Like maybe that's not an opportunity that's available to you. It sounds cool, right? I'm sure you're a great operator, but maybe go work for them instead of, trying to do your own thing. Um, so what I wanted the point I want to make is that if you're going to go and start up a new company, it's really, you have to set a very high bar for yourself to do that with a product or service. And also, I think you have to be realistic about who the competitors are or who like your collaborators are that might
right.
help you get to the next level. Because for every David bar that's out there that has all this protein and, somebody else is going to come up with a protein and creatine bar and someone's going to come up with protein, creatine, and vitamin D. Right. So, like, what's your competitive advantage? And there's thousands of bars that don't work and you and I are talking about the ones that do. So I would just say entrepreneurs kind of pick your lane and make sure like you're solving a frustration that you have yourself, and that there's a lane for what you're doing. Don't just like throw shit up at the Halo sector,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna have these bankruptcies.
Well, to that point, right? So that we're protecting the industry, people are betting on the right things or investing in the right things, or for those that are operating, you're operating the right way so that you're investable, right? They can invest in you. Pete, just in the fundamentals, maybe we get in the weeds, and I want to be respectful of your time because,
Oh,
by the
we
way, I have like 50 other questions. We could go for two
can do a follow
hours.
up. We can
But
do a follow up.
I do want to get in the fundamentals of like, what do you look at? Like, you look at a P&L. What are you looking at? You look at a balance sheet, or maybe even, in the franchise world, item 19 is like the hot thing, right? Like, what does it need to look like, or what should they be spending time on so that they're investable? Same to the other statements.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're running a 1,500 to 5,000 square foot studio and you're not doing more than $2,000 a day or $60,000 a month, that's a business that's going to struggle. Regardless of what your rent is, it's just not going to generate the type of profits and the type of investor interest, that you want. I think from a standpoint of what investors are looking at, they're looking at what's your return on invested capital and what are your unit economics. There's really no other way around, what the prototype is. And, when you go to an investor and say, I've got X amount of franchises out there, they want to know, are those franchisees happy? And like I said, I think maybe in one of our um, sessions with Halo Academy, the best way to diligence a franchise network is just call all the franchisees and they'll tell you that, hey, this is a great investment. I highly recommend it. I wish I bought more. Or they'll tell you, look, see, let me save you 5 years of your life. Okay. And don't do this. Right. And the reason why they tell you both of those is because one, they want to brag to you that, hey, I got into this thing early, like an Orange Theory, and like I'm crushing it, or a Planet Fitness, or they want to basically be like your like guardian angel and be like, I'm the one that like saved this guy, $1 million in his marriage and his kids, and whatever saves he had, right? So that's where you get the answers on the franchising side, and you just gotta like really take time to understand, does this business work? And everything looks sexy when you get into it, but are you willing to go in there day to day and open it up at 4:30 in the morning and close it at 10 o'clock? And also, I would say that if you're renting space and you're up against other retailers that stay open, 12 to 18 hours a day, and you think you're going to have a successful business running 3 to 5 classes a day, you got something coming for you, and it's not profit. Okay.
Yeah.
It's stress, anxiety, and, no money for the work you put in. Yeah. So I think, like Solid Core is a great example of, they run like 12, 14 classes a day. I think was what Brian was saying, and they're running it like an airline. So I think the boutique fitness space really needs to understand, is there demand for what I'm doing? And if there is, let me max out the calendar. And there's really no substitute for hard work. You can't tell me that, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, so it's like 600,000 people. You can't tell me you can't find 100 people to come in there a day, or 150 out of that, to come in different classes that meet what they're looking for. So there's a lot of work that I don't think people are doing in the boutique space, to be completely honest with you. So I look at unit economics and I look at like maxing out your revenue per hour, and that'll turn into economics that makes sense for you. On the health club side, looking at the leases, obviously is lease is either an asset or a liability. It's usually not, anything else, and if I'm going to sell a business that has 5 years left on the lease, I can't pay you 5 times EBITDA because I might not be able to renew the lease. So the landlord's kind of got me, has leverage over me. So if I'm going to sell a business, I want to make sure I have long-term lease extensions options in place. I want to make sure that the escalators on those aren't that, material. And I also want to, make sure that I can articulate what business I'm in, on each one of these. So I'm in the membership business. I'm in the class
estate.
pack,
Right.
if you got a high class pass, that might be an issue.
Oh man, you got me. I wanted to talk to you about that one too. Just the tension around classes. We won't do it today, but I do have some rapid fire questions just to respect your time.
Yeah, go ahead. Far away.
All right. So Project Willow, you post about it. You talk about it a lot. 5 bidders, 50 to 60 mil in enterprise value. What were the top 2 decisive factors for that whole situation?
Well, one, that's a hypothetical, case study that we put together.
Yep.
But having clubs that are all pretty much the same size, and also being able to see that the margin and the profitability of each one of the clubs are pretty consistent, gives people comfort that they're buying something that is not has a lot of diversity because we got we got over 10 clubs, and that there's a real team and that there's a DNA to the business. So one is like, the profitability across the portfolio is extremely important. And then the size of a private equity fund doesn't want to go around and try and buy, 1 or 2 clubs at a time. If you can bring them, 10 to 20 clubs, that's material for their internal growth. And then when you sell a company, you get it's a colonoscopy or some proctology. Like, it's not fun to do, and everything's got to check out.
Watch out.
Yeah, exactly. You probably do those on people. Let's say on people.
I'm gentle.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Kind of.
Yeah, so I'd say those are 2 things. Like, do you have a big enough cluster and consistent results, and are the leases something that I want to take over. Do I view them as fair market value or maybe even under fair market value with a lot of term? So those
Mm,
are the keys to that deal.
love it. From your experience, or maybe even the deals that you followed, top two reasons a deal just gets killed, it falls flat on its face.
Usually, irrational price expectations. And maybe there have been times in the past where we thought that we could sell a club chain to someone at a high price when multiples were higher. And we knew somebody wanted to come into that territory. But if you got a cluster of clubs, you're looking at kind of like 4 to 6 times club level is kind of what the replacement cost would be, or what the
Mhm.
20% return analysis that buyer is trying to achieve. Because owners of businesses that have private equity capital, have to get at least like a 15 to 25% return on that investment in order to go raise another fund or to attract more capital. So you kind of have to back into what is the owner of the business, what's their investment return, hurdles or like sweet spot of what
Mhm.
they're trying to do. And then that kind of backs into what multiple they're willing to allow the portfolio company to make, unless there's a lot of growth that's about to happen. They might pay you more for, having 3 or 4 leases or LOIs, or clubs are under construction, or they might view the territory as like so attractive, and it's a Planet Fitness or it's a Crunch, and they'll pay you, a 10 times or 12 times multiple because they have the right to build that cash register in that
Right.
territory. So the numbers have been pretty rational, I would say, overall. I don't see a deal and say like, holy shit, like I can't believe they paid that amount. I could see how they got there. With EOS, I think it's because of the profitability and
Yeah.
because of the financing cost of building new locations off of real estate developers, which is very
Right.
inexpensive.
Mhm.
And then for Crunch, Planet Fitness trades at 23 times EBITDA in the public market. So if you say Crunch is kind of not as good as Planet from an operating model, but pretty close, that deal getting done at 18 times doesn't really that's not that's not unrealistic to me
Right.
on that. They got to open up locations, they got to perform.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to me. It's at the high point, but it makes sense. Um,
I don't know if it was Crunch, and I think it was. I just don't imagine. I don't see Planet doing this, but I was really very surprised that I'm hearing that Crunch is piloting PT again, or
well, Planet is piling
is that
PT. Yeah,
Planet?
Crunch
Okay,
already
got it.
has the PT in
They
there.
already have the PT.
Yeah,
That's right.
so it's
Okay,
gonna be
so
it's gonna be interesting. It'll be interesting to
yeah,
see if you got to have people that are willing to pay for PT, right? That's the
right,
first thing. Then you've got, if you're running a Planet Fitness and you've got 10,000 members in a 20,000 square foot location, I'm not sure where the room is necessarily to
mhm,
run like one-on-one personal training. Um,
right,
and then you got to just think about, like, it might change the culture internally, and can you have people on the floor, which you don't really
sure.
do now. So I mean, it makes logical sense to try it. I just we'll see if it works.
Yeah, I'm not betting on it. And then last question for you, more for the operator, just knowing. Well, I don't know if anyone knows what's going on in the economy right now. It sounds like the key phrase or word is uncertainty, right? And then we just saw some news from the Fed about some craziness. Um, what are the main KPIs that you think operators need to pay attention to going into next year?
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, this is about membership growth and your margins. But really, like, the two simple things to say: if you got an attrition problem, and it's not because of a competitor that just opened up, and that'll kind of work itself out over 12 to 18 months, things will normalize again in the market.
Right.
Um, you just got to watch your business, on a day to day basis, and understand what's going on, and kind of still, you got to still live in the facility. There's no way around running a retail business and thinking that you can visit it once a month and
Right.
think that it's going to work the way you want it to. And some of the best operators are in their clubs all the time. Um,
Yep.
and if I go into a car and somebody takes me on a club tour and they have to put the address of the location in the GPS on how to get there, I already know the club chain's not good. I'll tell you, I swear to God, bro. I will tell
No, no,
you,
I
if you don't
believe
know
it.
how to
You
get
know,
to your club, if you don't know how you get to your club, not because you want to figure out how time and traffic, like, but you literally don't know exactly how to get there, we got a problem. And it's probably a
oh
deal I don't
man,
take on.
I have trauma. That was earlier. This is what 14 years ago. I got a nice coaching lesson on you just reminded me of that was a brutal day next to your president of the entire company. And, I'm just bad with directions, but it was a good lesson. Like, know where the hell you're going. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you brought that up. Now that's going to be a nice dinner table chat
Yeah.
tonight. It's like,
But look,
know where you're going
yeah.
and be in it.
Yeah.
So
But
good.
I would
Well,
just say that, like, there's a lot of opportunity in this market. Obviously, there's a significant amount of competition. Most of the people that we're working with right now are benefiting from, running their business more efficiently than they
mm,
did pre-COVID, utilizing the technology where they can.
right.
Um, and there's a lot of people that want to come into our industry. And, that's from the GLP benefit. That's from kids that just want to work out, look better. These kids
Yeah.
aren't going to bars and, drinking as much as they used to, which like maybe you and I did for several years. Like now they
Yeah.
just come straight to the
I'm
health
trained
club,
for it.
and they're doing like Olympic squats and they're popping it up on Instagram. Like, awesome, keep coming. Um, so I think there's a big opportunity. The only thing I would leave you with is that, there is a lot of consolidation that's going to happen
Mm,
because it has to happen. And when a Planet Fitness or a Crunch or Mountainside or EOS, if they're coming into your territory, and you're an independent operator, it's better for everyone if they can figure out a fair deal to buy your
yeah.
clubs, put money into your clubs, take over your membership base, then open it up across the street and putting, 10 or 15 crunches in your market
Exactly.
because everyone kind of loses for a period of time.
They're going
And
to eat you
then
alive.
and then you're up against, private equity, which, I say is like kind of playing chess versus you as an operator playing checkers, unfortunately. So there's a period of time when you could do that. And that was probably over the last 20 years. And I think the next 10 years is basically like we're playing a private equity health club, bricks and mortar rollout game. And people will define the category that they are in. And the categories probably get a little more nichey. So it'll be
Mm,
HVLP, HVLP2, HVLP plus, recovery, like full blown, med spa. Then there'll be like campuses, and then there'll be like cults with, Orange Theory, Soul Cycle, things like that. So I don't know. There's a lot to digest there, but like, look,
yeah.
I'm excited about it as I've ever been. Investors are making money, and there's a lot of capital chasing the Halo consumer. So I
Yes.
think it kind of relies on all of us in the industry to make sure that we execute, we get that capital in, they get a good return. They say, hey, yeah, of course I'm invested in the Halo sector. Right?
Yeah.
Billions of dollars
So
come into
good.
the sector, we solve a lot of problems.
So powerful, and just another reason why, let's reinforce, you have to have your unit economics on point. You have to be in the business. Don't let it run you, or be that passive franchisee or passive business owner, or you got to be in the mix and make sure that you have your hands wrapped around, your arms wrapped around your P&L, your balance sheet, and your cash flow, your margins.
Yep.
Pete, this is freaking amazing. I
Awesome,
love
man.
it. I've been
Great
waiting
talking to
for
you.
this. Yeah, no, great talking to you too. How can people get a hold of you if they want to subscribe to Halo Talks or learn more about the Halo economy or even work with Integrity Square?
Yeah, sure.
How can they
Yeah, I
get a
mean,
hold of you?
first thing, just go to Halo Talks, and we got 600 podcasts up there. Have you been on yet? We got to. Did we
No, I'd
launch
love
ours yet?
to.
Yeah, we'll get that rolling for
Yes.
January.
Right.
And then integritysq.com is our advisory firm. We typically do deals over $3 million of EBITDA to get
Wow.
companies private equity capital, and we're doing some valuation and consulting work. So look, there's other advisors out there too that we're good friends with. So we just want to make sure that people do the right deals, feel good about getting paid for what they've built, and take the call when somebody wants to buy your business, and don't be last dollar greedy on it,
Mm,
because there's a lot of money to be made, and private equity comes calling only a couple times in the life cycle of a business, and like this is the time it's happening over the next like 3 to 5 years. So
right.
take advantage of it.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Well, thank
All
you
right, bro.
so
Good to see
much,
you, man. Go
everybody.
Halo.
This has been another episode of the Owner Seat. Yes, go Halo. I'm your host, Albert Ramos. And as I mentioned, new episodes are every Monday and Friday at 8 a.m. Central. Pete, go Halo. Thank you
Thanks, bud.
so much.
I
You're doing
appreciate
amazing
you
work.
waving the flag. Talk to you soon. Later, bro.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon,
Awesome.
sir.